Rajitha, just moving on to you. So Hayleys, probably the single largest merchandise exporter out of Sri Lanka. I think about 6%, of exports come under Hayleys banner. You also have a large range of manufacturing facilities overseas. Just talk to us a little bit, if you would, about how Sri Lanka fits into that picture and what we bring to the table.
Thank you, Juan, and good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be in this forum today, organized by the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. As Juan correctly mentioned, Hayleys is one of the largest diversified export segments in Sri Lanka. We contribute somewhere between 5 to 6% of the merchandise exports out of the country. So if I go for key sectors of Hayleys, which has a strong Sri Lankan presence, whilst they have expanded overseas as well. First industry which is very close to my heart is Haycarb, which is a global leader in coconut shell-based activated carbon. So we have about 16% of the global market share. The almost 60% of our turnover comes out of the Sri Lankan exports, and the balance 40% by value is overseas, meaning it is Thailand and Indonesia primarily. And now we are building our 7th manufacturing plant in Philippines. So when I mention these countries, you would realize why we have gone to those countries. It's closer to our raw material, the availability of raw material. And you all know the coconut crisis we have today. We don't have to dwell on that too much. So we saw this problem a few decades ago, and we diversified our manufacturing footprint where the raw material is abundantly available and close, because transportation of that commodity, which is a dangerous cargo, is next to impossible. So that has been the primary reason for Haycarb to diversify and into the other geographies. Second reason being, obviously with international clientele, there has to be risk mitigation in terms of geographical spread. So that has given a secondary reason as well. Then if you look at the products, which is primarily in the manufacture and marketing of both household and industrial gloves, both in the natural rubber and the synthetic. Again, our move into Thailand, we have about 50-50 split bit of turnover between the Sri Lanka and Thailand. Again, to do with Thailand being a country where there is abundance of natural rubber latex. So what you've done is, as a strategy, more and more synthetic latex products on value addition is maintained in Sri Lanka, and most of the natural rubber latex is moved to Thailand. So that has been our primary reason. Again, the risk mitigation aspect, and also looking at some of these markets, some of these countries have large local markets. If you take to Thailand, Thailand has a very large glove market. Thailand has a very large coconut carbon market internally. So those have also helped us to, as a subsidiary factors, to go in. Then the other industry that we are in on fiber, we are in a limited way. Coconut fiber products, we are moved into Thailand, into India. That is again due to raw material availability and the cost factors involved in that. Then we have certain set of exports that are 100% Sri Lankan. The fabric manufacturer, Hayleys Fabric, which is closer to Suren as well, because we are nominated supplier of brands to the garment industry. So entire fabric manufacturing, fabric mills are in Sri Lanka. So there has not been any reason for us to go out, because there is a strong garment industry that has evolved, and we have done significant value addition into moving into the value chain of the garments. And we are into aluminium, again, a newly emerging export segment for us, and the agri products. So you understand the key rationale of we moving out. Then the next question is, why did we retain that majority in Sri Lanka is a pertinent question, right? Why didn't we move everything out? Why did we retain a majority? If you look at the overall Hayleys portfolio, about 70% of our exports still is maintained in Sri Lanka. So here what I call over time, over experience, our centers of excellence, like the centers of the R&D, technical and engineering resources primarily, backed by other supply chain initiatives, our home base has been here. So we have built a lot of skill and technology and know-how around it. And given that fact, and also given the fact that we are Sri Lankan domiciled company, we have certain responsibility and also there's an emotional attachment to Sri Lanka. So those reasons as to the ability to create what you call these centers of excellence in primarily driving what I call sustainable innovation as a key requirement for value addition has enabled us to stay in Sri Lanka. And I must say, in the Sri Lankan environment, I mean, we have an excellent environment for us to move in the value chain and promote this sustainable innovation, take a leadership in the green manufacturing, sustainability, other initiatives, ESG, and we have the capability to move up on the innovation and the technology. So that primarily has helped us to maintain that the most value-adding 70% in Sri Lanka. However, one must note that that is how we feel as investors who have been in the country for 50, 60 years. And we have a large resource base and management and expertise base in Sri Lanka who has that primary knowledge. But the situation is going to be totally different for an outside investor who is looking at our country for the first time. So these two should not be misinterpreted or misconceptualized, because the requirement for a foreign investor to come into the country are totally different to what an established investor has found comfort with. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajitha. That was very comprehensive. Rajitha, just in terms of just global value chains and building on some of the things that we've just talked about, how does Sri Lanka position itself in the global value chain, given things like high cost of doing business, shortage of labor, a more tech-savvy workforce? What do you see as the right set of investments that will work to ensure we encourage the right type of investments into Sri Lanka? What would your recommendations be?
Yeah. So it is a very pertinent question. What actually Sri Lanka needs now, yesterday, and also to execute very expediently. The first of all, I think there has to be a clear demonstration from top to bottom of the government and the other institutions that economic development led by exports, industrialization is the #1 priority of this country. It should not be limited to a paper or a statement, but by the actions of the institutes, by the top, coming from the top down, that must be demonstrated. Because Sri Lanka has so many problems today. But if you do not prioritize, if you do not identify and demonstrate by action, because this is where we have missed every time. We have done plans, we have set up committees over and over again. And to the current bureaucracy, the committee's bureaucracy, the recommendations pile up, right? But where is the execution? If this execution happen, are we talking about till this 14, 15 million at a $15 billion exports? I could remember 5 years back, I sat on some of these forums and we were talking about reaching $50 billion exports 5, 6 years ago. Still we are at $16 billion. And now we are talking about in 5 years, we are going to achieve 28 billion exports and 30 billion total merchandise exports and 30 billion total exports. So what is that priority? By what I call by walking the talk, from top to top down, it must be demonstrated. So in this, I identify about 5 factors that are essentially required if you look at the merchandise to kick off at an expedient rate. If you want to go to $30 billion, you need to have double-digit growth in exports every year, about 13% annualized. We have not had that. We have gone backward because of the economic downturn, and we are trying to come back strongly. So the first one is definitely, as correctly pointed out previously, ease of doing business. We need to cut the bureaucracy. We need to have fast land approvals. I'll give you an example. our latest investment in Philippines. When we went there, I was pleasantly surprised. I could reach the BOI not through connections, through social media. All I want to do is go to LinkedIn, BOI of Philippines, coconut sector, boom, all the necessary director generals, everybody is in LinkedIn. And just connect, have a chat, set up the calls, and get the overall framework done. And how they welcomed us when we want to set up. We have only had a moderate investment in the Philippine size, only $10 million. But coconut sector was a high priority for Philippines. It's coming from the president's direction. So when we went in, we were accommodated by the BOI, we were taken to different lands, even the raw material, they went with us 3 days, sponsored by BOI vehicles, taking the investor around, facilitating everything so that I'll be keen, my team will be keen to invest in Philippines. So that is the welcome you receive, the first impression of the country. That is so crucial. We may think about digitalization is required, but if we don't have digitalization, if we can't run today, how do you walk fast? We have so much people in the country, so much in the public sector. Even when an investor comes, you can appoint one manager, each for an investment. So look at this in a new way. If we wait till this digitalization happens to kickstart the economy, we are going to miss the bus again. Do the manual processes, but do expediently. And do not repeat what is already done in the world. South Korea example is there, Singapore example is there. If you want Rwanda example that is happening today, is there. Learn from them, apply what is relevant to us locally, and go back to some of the good things we have done. 1977, Mr. Jayajawardena, the Greater Colombo Economic Commission, a success story. Mr. Premadasa, the setup of the garment industry, another success story. How did they do that? How did they do that? With the same administration, technology 30, 40 years ago, but they had vision, clear focus, execution. Mr. Premadasa used to sit, I could remember those days. I mean, he was personally supervising projects. So that is critical. That is critical. And the second thing is, we have to have the incentives. IMF is blocking us. Why? We don't know. The new investments, even to FDI to be attracted to Sri Lanka, we are not able to give tax incentives. Why is that? We have to convince the IMF now. It's a good time. Say that we need to bring the foreign investment. It's not going to affect the existing tax base. You can continue to tax exporters at 30%, but new investments come in, provide the incentives. Philippines way went in. First 5 years, tax holiday. Next 10 years, half tax rate, where the full tax rate is less than 30% that we pay in exports. All duty-free, those access is available. So you have to have that. That's why I said earlier, when somebody looks from outside, they have the Asian map. They have 5, 6, 7, 8 countries to look around. So if you don't have the incentives, who's going to look at us? So that is very critical for the government to get this approved, or rather concurrence with the IMF to incentivize the new investment, foreign direct, foreign as well as local. Then the third factor is we have to get our medium to long-term energy balance correct. Sri Lanka is very high cost on energy. So getting the correct renewable mix and getting lower cost fossil fuel resources, either LNG or even a second coal plant. I know that it's no for sustainability, but before the environmental sustainability, economy has to run. If Sampur is a place to have the second coal plant, go for it and have the power base. Then the next factor, because of the time I will fast track, I want to highlight these 5 factors. The next most important factor is management of the water resources. Do you know that, I mean, a lot of people don't know this. There is no industrial water available at the moment in any of the zones. If a large chemical industry wants to come and set up, say $50 million, $100 million, chemical industry wants to come in, there is no water. Can you imagine that? A country where abundant water resources are there, so much rainfall, but everything goes to the sea. So what I'm talking about here is, for example, industry like Haycarbs, industry like gloves reproducts, they require at least 1,000 cubic meters of water a day. There are two zones that can accommodate, that has that facility. One is Biagama, one is Katnaika. Both are capped. They can't expand anymore. And we don't have solid waste disposal in the country still, apart from the geocycle, whatever the INSI plant. So this critical facility, infrastructure, has to be there. So if the government is talking about the new zones, that's very good. But a new zone to come in, it will take 2-3 years. What can you do immediately? Expand the Biagama zone. There was a plan to have the phase 3 or phase 4. Expand it, allow for at least another 50 industry to set up there with additional water. So by the time you build another zone, at least 50 more industries can come and occupy in Sri Lanka. We are looking for land. We can't find land with what? And the last factor I want to highlight is education. Very important. Sri Lanka has to get the higher education policy framework, invite the private universities to come. We have to basically accelerate the generation of, especially the STEM graduates, because the way the exodus of the people that has taken place, by another few years, if we don't churn out more and more STEM graduates, Sri Lanka is going to starve with the technical resources. So these are some of the key factors you want to identify as primary to our industrial development.
Thank you, Raja. Thank you for that. Rajitha, moving back to a question on lack of raw materials. So the question that's come from the audience is, should we respond to lack of raw materials, coconut rubber, etc.? Should we use the land? Should we let the land be utilized for something else? What is your view in terms of where we, particularly industries that are close to Hayleys' heart, in terms of raw materials and land utilization?
Right. I think once again, a very important question. It's always a trade-off between the priorities of a government and a society, and how you balancing it, right? If you look at the coconut, one of the biggest stress, because we are now in a crisis of coconuts. Actually, unfortunately, the current government is facing the brunt of an outcome that has been ill-managed many years ago. There are a lot of reasons given for the coconut debacle, but the number one reason we identify is the failure in the fertilizing that has happened. We all know what happened there, but the impact of that is coming after many years. And based on our analysis, the single most affecting factor for this drop in coconut is not fertilizing the coconut lands. So that is completely a breakdown of what I call sometimes I can call it an idiotic action that took place. It's an insane action of going into, without any plan, trying to do inorganic, organic fertilizer in the country. We all know what happened there. But past is gone. What can we do now? Because this is an industry that we have studied. We have studied this industry around the world where the coconut is done. There are two actions. One is quite obvious. We need to grow coconuts, fertilize. North and East, as we have identified as a priority area for any government's development. North and East is the ideal new triangle for coconuts. So replanting has to take place whilst taking care of the existing plantations and certain policies by the government of defragmentation of the land. But impacts of these, the additional crop is going to be 2-3 years down the line. But what can you do now? Because your 3 billion nuts, so-called, we don't know whether that number is correct in the first place. It is supposed to be dropped by about 15%. We are talking about 2.5 billion, 2.6 billion nuts now in this crisis. So the only thing you can do, only prudent action is to import the coconut, right? What else can you do? 3 years to get the crop back, maybe even more. You have a huge shortfall now for consumption as well as for the industry. On top of it, you are trying to say, currently 700, 800 million export target, you want to raise it to $2 billion. So that math doesn't work. If we are not importing the coconut, this cannot be resolved. So why can't we import the coconut? This fear psychosis among the different fraction of the society, government, ministries, that allowing the dehusked coconut into the country will create diseases. These are the quarantine, age-old quarantine rules of the country that has prevented our development. Now, this is where I think we had to be very decisive. Rather than talking about it, take the action and face whatever the consequences of that, import the coconut. Thailand today, as she knows, has one of the largest coconut industries in the world. Thailand has their own coconut plantations, an agricultural country. Their coconut industry largely dependent upon the imported nuts from Philippines and Indonesia. China, the entire industry and the consumption depends on the imported coconuts. And how many other fruits and vegetables do we bring into this country? Why not? Why not? Why should they and why should not the coconut? If we have the fear, have proper fumigation practices, certified at the loading port, inspected at the unloading port in Colombo, certified by an authority like SGS, that proper fumigation is done. And we should have at least 500 billion coconuts brought to the country. If we are thinking of increasing the exports, you need to go up to about 1 billion nuts of coconut imports. So this is the only solution. I think time doesn't permit me to talk about rubber, but coconut is a straightforward solution. If there is a will, if you want to take a chance and make a decision for the betterment of the people of the country and betterment of the industry and the exports.
Rajitha, I want to mention that actually the Ministry of Industries and the Ministry of Finance and all the other line ministries, responsible line ministries, now we are in a discussion to import those things, especially the frozen coconut and the milk and other things. So we are in a discussion and we will see.
May I add a little bit? The bringing of the kernel won't resolve the problem because you have to bring it under refrigerated conditions. We did this in a previous government time, and that was a failure. Yes. Because by the time it comes to Colombo, it's a very high-cost process. You have to have reefer containers, and that chemical control has to be perfect. And slight alteration of the taste by that is going to reject the shipments. So that has failed. So I'm not too sure why we are trying to attempt that. Why not the coconut? My question is, why aren't we bringing the coconut?
Thank you. I think we'll park the coconut debate for the moment and move slightly on, or we will be here for the rest of the day.